Today, we're going to dig into a really fundamental idea, one that explains why some things last and others just fall apart. We're talking about everything from our own bodies to entire civilizations. The principle behind it all, it's called the Law of Nested Emergence.
I mean, think about it for a second. The universe is a pretty chaotic place, right? Everything seems to be constantly pulling apart. And yet, we see all this incredible, stable, complex stuff around us. So what's the secret sauce? How does order not just happen, but actually stick around?
Okay, let's start with something simple. Picture an old-school mechanical clock. If its gears don't mesh perfectly, what happens? Well, it doesn't just run a little slow, it stops being a clock at all. It's just a box of gears. And that right there tells us something huge. For any system to even exist, its parts have to work together. Coherence isn't a bonus feature, it's literally the price of admission.
All right, now let's scale that idea way up to the entire universe. Just like those clock gears, the basic laws of reality, physics, chemistry, biology, they all have to play nice. They can't contradict each other. Physics has to work with chemistry, and chemistry has to work for biology. It's like they're all nested inside each other in one big continuous reality. If they weren't compatible, well, the universe we know and love just couldn't hold itself together.
So how do we figure out the rule that makes all this stability possible? We've got to look for clues. And our first big clue has to do with the simple idea. The past isn't really in the past. It's all about something called the memory of form.
Let's get personal for a second. Think about a scar. Maybe you have one from a childhood accident. You know, a moment of chaos that ended with a trip to the doctor. That event, it didn't just disappear into a story you tell. It left a physical trace, a real mark that's part of your body's structure right now.
And this gets at something so important. The past doesn't just happen to us. It gets absorbed by us. See, a scar isn't just a memory of what happened. It is what happened, physically written into the present. That tissue, which once responded to pressure one way, now resists it in a new way. History, quite literally, becomes structure. And once you see this pattern, you see it everywhere. It's not just in our scars. It's in the rings of a tree, which are basically a diary of droughts and good years. You see it in the layers of rock that tell a story of immense heat and pressure. Even the shape of a galaxy holds the memory of how it was formed. The universe doesn't have a short-term memory problem. It writes its history right into the fabric of things.
Okay, so that's clue number one. History becomes structure. Now for our second clue. If the past gives us the building blocks, how are they put together in a way that lasts? Well, that brings us to what we can call the architecture of dependence.
Picture reality like a ladder, or maybe a stack of building blocks. At the very bottom, you've got physics. The next layer up, chemistry, doesn't get rid of physics. No, it just organizes physics into new stable patterns. Then biology comes along and builds on top of the reliable rules of chemistry. And then societies, they build on our biological nature. You see the pattern? Each new level depends 100% on the layer below it.
Now, this kind of flips a common idea on its head, doesn't it? We're often taught that strength is about being independent. But what this shows us is that the exact opposite is true. Real lasting stability comes from having solid, reliable support systems, the things that just work, quietly, in the background. And the difference between the two is just night and day. On one hand, you have stability. That's what you get when you recognize and take care of what you rely on. On the other hand, you get fragility. And that's what happens when you start treating your foundations like they're disposable or just a cost you can cut. It's not a moral failing, you see. It's a structural one.
Think about it like this. If your organs are failing, you can't just replace them with sheer determination, right? Your willpower is on a higher level that completely depends on your biology. It's the same for a society. You can't just slap some aspirations on top of a system where the foundation of trust has crumbled. You just can't skip a layer.
All right, so let's recap. We have our two big clues. Clue number one, history becomes structure. Clue number two, new complex things always depend on the simpler layers beneath them. So now it's time to put it all together and reveal the fundamental law that's been hiding in plain sight.
So what's the connection? How do these two ideas, the memory of form and this architecture of dependence, actually fit together? What's the one single rule that explains how a universe full of chaos manages to build things that actually endure?
And here it is. It's called the Law of Nested Emergence. And what it says is basically this. You can't build something new and lasting by just tossing out the old. Nope. Real durable progress happens when you take the parts that already work,
You preserve them, and you reorganize them into something bigger, better, more coherent.
I mean, evolution is the perfect example of this in action. Biology didn't invent a new set of rules to replace chemistry. It just got really good at using chemistry. Multicellular life didn't get rid of single cells. It organized them into teams. Evolution isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering. It moves forward by folding its past successes inward, turning them into the rock-solid foundation for whatever comes next.
Okay, so here's the kicker. This isn't just some abstract theory about how the universe works. This is a practical, honest-to-goodness instruction manual for how we should be building things in our own world, from our economies to our governments. It's all about designing with memory.
And unfortunately, you don't have to look far to see what happens when we ignore this law. Think about economies that act like natural resources are infinite, or governments that shred public trust just to be a little more efficient, or even aid projects that totally ignore the local social fabric they're supposed to be helping. In every case, these systems become brittle, fragile. Why? Because they're trying to build a fancy new second floor while knocking out the foundation. And that, well, that never ends well.
So this really changes how we should think about innovation, you know? Real game-changing innovation isn't always about burning everything down and starting from scratch. More often, it's about deeply understanding the stuff that's already working, the stable foundations, and then finding brilliant new ways to recombine and reorganize those pieces into something even better. And if you need one final image to hold on to, this is it. Think of a coral reef. It is, quite literally, built out of its own history. Each new generation of coral grows on top of the skeletons of the generations that came before. The past isn't gone. The past becomes the load-bearing structure that makes all the vibrant new life possible.
Which really leaves us with a choice, a big one. As we keep pushing for progress, are we going to keep designing things as if we can somehow outrun our foundations, as if we can escape the very things we depend on? Or are we finally going to learn to design the way nature does, by building with our history, by preserving our foundations, and by creating things that are actually truly built to last?